Why do we have many sichos from the Rebbe, but very few from previous Rebbeim?
There's two reasons. The first is that they verbring less. The Rebbeim verbring much less than the Rebbe verbringt. What the Rebbe did is so overwhelmingly extraordinary that it's really, it's staggering to the mind. It's completely mind-blowing. What the Rebbe did over the course of his Nesias. The earlier Rebbeim said Maimorim. And that is what people came to Lubavitch for, a Maimer. A Maimer is an hour and 15 minutes. Once a week, possibly twice a week, not always every week. And that's what you had from the Rebbe, was a Maimer. And that's what your passion was. You spent your days and nights learning a Maimer. It was a normal thing for Chassidim to memorize the Maimerim of the Rebbe. The Rebbe said a Maimer also. And in addition to the Maimer, he did so many other things. There were sichos of all different types. That the Rebbe said it was an incredible volume of Torah that other Rebbeim did not engage in. There are many reasons why this is the way it is, but that's the fact. The early Rebbeim verbringt much less. The early Rebbeim's verbringings were frequently private affairs. They were familial affairs. They were not public. There were really only 3 days a year that the Rebbeim verbringt in public. One was Simchas Torah, one was Yutas Kislev, and one was Purim. And then, of course, by the Friedrich Rebbe, Yud Beis Tammuz. And the Rebbeim, every Shabbos meal was a verbringen in theory. They said Torah, they said stories, they brought out Nyani Avoid and Hira, but there was simply less kamos. The Rebbe verbringt extraordinarily in terms of the volume of the verbringens. The other factor is that the tradition was that they didn't write the verbringens down, they didn't write the sichos down. It's hard to understand why Chassidim did not record the sichos, because it really doesn't make sense. A Rebbe speaks, you record it. I suppose they felt like it was Torah Shabbal Peh, they would recall it, they would remember it in their memory. There's a story which is brought from Harav Zevin in Sipurei Chassidim about the Wolfer, who was a Talmud of the Maggid, criticizing one of the greatest Talmidim of the Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Babreski. He says, you and the Rebbe and the Torah are three different things. So you need a ksav, it has to all be written down. By us, we and the Rebbe and the Torah were one, nothing was written down, it was all in our memory, and that was it. Chassidim didn't write the verbringen down. The previous Rebbe had tradition, Baal Peh, of verbringen from various Rebbeim on various occasions, which he repeated on occasion. But considered to how much, they actually published a volume of sichos from the Tzemach Tzedek, and sichos from the Rebbe Marash, and sichos from the Rebbe Rashab, which are culled from the sichos of the previous Rebbe who's quoting them. But those are two different factors. Factor number one, as the earlier Rebbeim said, fewer verbringens, and factor number two, the idea of recording it was not a priority. The beginning of the serious recording of sichos starts with the Friedrich Rebbe's writing of his father's own sichos. The Teira Shalom, which is a volume of sichos of the Rebbe Rashab, is by and large the Rebbe Yatzos Hanochas. The Friedrich Rebbe used to sit down and write down the verbringens of his father with his extraordinary memory and just write it down. There are Hanochas from the Chassidim which tend to be much shorter, but he created the precedent. The Friedrich Rebbe did. The Rebbe verbringens, he write it down. If it's a Maimer or a sicha, makes no difference. The Friedrich Rebbe began to record his father's sichos. And when the previous Rebbe became Rebbe, I guess Chassidim had sort of become sensitive to the idea that when the Rebbe speaks, you should record the sichos, not only the Maimerim. So for the previous Rebbe, there are sichos. I don't know how many volumes it is at this point, but it is a number of volumes. It's, 10 volumes of sichos, and they have more to print still. It's much less because the Rebbe spoke less. The verbringens were shorter. And they were not as scholarly. But by the previous Rebbe, sichos were recorded. When the Rebbe became Rebbe, and this is how I was explained by my mashpiyim, the Rebbe was spoken to the generation after the Holocaust. And the Rebbe could not give enough. He could not give enough. It's unheard of that a Gadol B'Yisrael should give of himself so much like the Rebbe did. You have to remember, the Rebbe literally thought about every Jew on the planet, every day. He thought about every Jew on the planet. If there was a kibbutz of 4 families on an island of Madagascar, or in the Philippines, or in Formosa, in Taiwan, or in some place in Japan, it was the Rebbe's business to get somebody to them, to get them to eat matzah. And of course, the communities that were larger, the Rebbe was more involved with. The Rebbe's philosophy always was that there was a place in the world, like for example, Yerushalayim, where there were plenty of Fromma Yidden. He didn't concern himself with that. The Rebbe was concerned with Jews all over the world. It was a full-time job. The Rebbe thought every day about every Jew in the world, and every opportunity he got to send somebody to a place that was fortuitous. In other words, he came across a human being, the stories of a professor who was going on a sabbatical, and the Rebbe would, in effect, take his sabbatical and turn it into Fatos Hayados. The Rebbe did it again and again and again, reaching every Jew in the world, which is an incredibly time-consuming thing, also very emotionally engaged. The Rebbe was so involved. And when the Rebbe thought about a Jew who was a Nidacham Be'eretz Mitzrayim and Eivdim Be'eretz Ashur, there was nothing in the world more important than this. He was so singularly involved, and he would spend whatever time and energy and money needed to help that person. In addition to that, the Rebbe had to shepherd a generation of broken Jews who came from the war. The Rebbe sat for 25 years in Yechidus, 3 nights a week, till 8, 9 in the morning, talking to people, counseling people, helping people. I heard from a good source that the Friedrich Rebbe's wife, the Rebbe Tznechamadina, said, I was a daughter-in-law by the Rebbe Rashab. I was the wife by the Friedrich Rebbe. They all had Yechidus. No one sat late in the morning. They sat for 2 hours. They sat for 3 hours, 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours of Yechidus, twice a week. She complained to Chassidim that the Rebbe is throwing his health away and that they have to stop him. They're not allowed to allow him to do this. But the Rebbe was the kind of Rebbe that you couldn't say a word to. If you would even suggest to the Rebbe that he should do something other than what he thought, the Rebbe would ask you if you wanted the job. There's actually a tape where you can hear the Rebbe saying to somebody, "Willst du benehmen dem schwer? You want the job? Otherwise sit down and be quiet, let me do the job." So that's another factor. And then there's the Torah. The Rebbe gave and gave and gave and gave and gave. And the Torah that the Rebbe gave us is not only incredibly voluminous, it's incredibly rich, it's incredibly original, and it's incredibly relevant. The Rebbe is the master of Torah Lashon Hara. In other words, he expounded on every area of Torah, in Nigle, and in Halacha, and in Kabbalah, and in Chassidus, and in Drush, and in Musar. And in everything, he brought out the deep scholarly dimension that immediately translated it into a practical, living thing. The Rebbe gave and gives with a kamus, which is beyond imagining how much the Rebbe gave. And people don't realize that when they finish printing all the Rebbe's sichos, and they finish printing all the Rebbe's Igros Kodesh, they're going to first begin to search all the Rebbe's Yechidus. There are thousands of manuscripts of private Yechidus that people had with the Rebbe all over the world that people don't even know about, that are very precious and full of substantive Torah and Musar and Torah and Hashkafas Ha'olam that is waiting for the world to be nourished by. It's extraordinary. It's completely extraordinary. And the only way to explain why the Rebbe was so different than the Rebbeim before is because the Rebbe saw himself literally as the Rebbe of the whole of Klal Yisrael. It was after the Holocaust, and the Rebbe just couldn't give enough to nourish our generation.